Hi, we are in Florence at the most amazing panoramic spot. I love this place. This is called the Michelangelo Piazza, and it is the Belvedere, named for Franco Zeffirelli, the famous director of film, but also operas that I love, like La Boheme. And so you can see in the background, like that 14th century gate and a bell tower. And there's the Arno River, which is the main river that runs through Florence. And then it goes all the way down. You see Brunelleschi's dome, which is that incredible dome that my father loves. And next to it, the Duomo, which is the tower. And then if you go further down, you see the Ponte Vecchio, which has all the incredible jewelry shops and is the old bridge. And then beyond it, the Ponte Santa Trinita, which is where Dante first met Beatrice. I'll shut up so you can enjoy the view.
My sister's got from this.
I love this music so much. I'm so lucky in so many ways, and one of which is I get to pick the music for these trailers. The publisher makes them, and they'll send me a couple of which one do you like, and then they'll play the music, and I get so jazzed walking around the block with the dogs, like, ding ding, like that TikTok. Anyway, all right, I better get to it. So let me explain before we jump into Florence. This book is not historical fiction. This is a contemporary book. It is about a woman who one day gets a really gargantuan inheritance from Tuscany. But the catch is she doesn't know who left her the money. And the problem is that she's adopted, so she doesn't really even know her birth mother, her birth father. There's a lot about her history she doesn't know. So she goes to Tuscany to find out. And when she's there, she starts to research the woman who left her the money, who she thinks might be her grandmother. And she finds out that that woman was completely paranoid and delusional and believed that she herself was descended from Caterina Sforza, who was Italian royalty. So that's what the book's about, and that's like the top line of the plot. But like we're saying, this is really about behind the book. What is going into the book? So let's begin in Florence. And there I was, all puffy-eyed and everything, trying to make sense but here's the thing. The part of the book that really got interesting to me is imagining who are you really? What is your identity? When you do trace back your ancestry, what if you really were related to Italian royalty in Florence? And I thought, well, this is so interesting because Caterina Sforza, and I'll tell you a little about her in a minute. But first, I want to talk about Florence, because Florence was the birthplace of the Renaissance. It all happened in Florence. It was practically at the time the most important city in Western civilization. It was a trade route. It was wealthy. And the Renaissance was a rebirth in so many different ways. And Caterina Sforza lived during the Renaissance. That's why this matters. So here we are in Florence, and Florence becomes the center during the Renaissance of architecture. Actually, this is the Palazzo Vecchio. These are pictures that I took, on the trip that you can see. And you walk around Florence and you can't believe it. Like when you see that vista, those red tiles, you see the medieval aspects of the city. You see the Renaissance buildings. You see the architecture flourish during the Renaissance. Brunelleschi, he invented the dome that's on the Sistine Chapel. All of these things, architecture, here's the Ponte Vecchio close up, by the way, which of course, I remarked that there's great jewelry stores there, which is not necessarily historical, but I'm a girl and I like to shop. But, the art that comes from the Renaissance, this you will recognize, The Birth of Venus, Botticelli. I set a scene in this book because there's a chase scene in the Uffizi, right past this picture. That's so fun. This is a beautiful picture from Raphael, who's like my favorite painter. And I talk in the book about Raphael blue because he was famous for this blue. And actually, this is a picture of Raphael himself, which I think he's kind of cute. I kind of have a crush on him, and I named my pony Raffi after him. Okay, that's a fun fact of nothing. This is something else you will recognize. You will recognize this painting, Caravaggio. This is how I am, like, is how you are on like Monday nights or what? Well, no, Monday nights we're having fun, but like Sunday night, no. Anyway, you get the idea. Art was flourishing. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, the Sistine Chapel. So much was happening during that time. Different painting techniques were being developed, like sfumato, which is what that Mona Lisa smokiness. And the other thing that was happening, science was booming, Galileo, all of these things were happening at once. And the interesting thing about what was happening, and it was all happening in Florence, let's talk about with respect to painting for a minute. The painters who were all starting to develop their own studios and take on apprentices knew each other's work. Florence is very small. You can walk around Florence like it doesn't take that long. And they were all watching and they were being influenced by each other. And when you read enough about the lives of the painters, which you can in Vasari, and I did for this book, you understand that the painters in a way were competing with each other. Not in a bad way, in a way, well, he's good, I want to be better. And like your competition is Michelangelo, so you're Da Vinci. Like these were the best artists of all time, all in the same place in the 1400s to the 1600s, in the same time, all working in similar mediums. And so you have this competition to be the best. And interestingly, at the same time, that was even happening in the business world, in banking, where families like the Medici and the Sforzas, but the Medici are really a banking family. The Borgias, you know these names. These were noble families, many centered in Florence, who were all vying for wealth, political power, and might. So everything was going on all at once. And this, I kind of think of this book, even though it's this contemporary plot line. And interestingly, it's all of us too. That it's a story of a woman in a certain time. And she was a woman of her times, and we are too. So here is our girl, Julia, who's going to go over there and a modern day person and try to figure out, was my maybe grandmother sane or insane or delusional or not? And by the way, I kind of look like Caterina Sforza, she thinks to herself, and maybe I'm really related to Caterina Sforza. So she goes to learn about Caterina Sforza, who, by the way, is someone you should know about. Because what's so cool about her is that we love books, right? Most of us are women here. But I mentioned before that she was the daughter of the Duke of Milan. She was born in Milan, and she grew up in his beautiful castle. He was the richest man in the whole north of Italy, and he had an incredible library, and she found her life in books. One of the books she is clearly known to have read was called On Famous Women. It was by a guy named I want to say Boccaccio. Yes, of course, Giovanni Boccaccio. And it was written in 1359. She was born in 1463. So remember when you were a little girl with a book? Okay, I won't bring up Nancy Drew, but that's who I want to bring up, right? I just sat there and go, partly when you read when you're young, you are kind of wondering like, well, who can I be? What is this woman like? And this was a book that was ahead of its time because it was about on famous women. And Boccaccio went through all of the Bible stories, Greek myths, like here, Argia, daughter of King Adrastus. This is my little marking because I read this. And it's so Circe, daughter of the sun. He went through, and what he was doing was writing a book about really powerful women. In its time, that was revolutionary because women had a very prescribed role, and it was wife and mother and shut up, like, right? So here he writes this book, which at the time people are like, well, why are you writing about women? Little Caterina gets hold of it, and she is profoundly influenced by it. Because in her little mind of how do I want it, who do I want to grow up to be? She starts to take these as role models, God bless her. And so the next thing that happens to her, fast forward, is she is engaged, actually married at age 14, and of course to an arranged marriage, which ends up being so horrible, in fact, that the guy doesn't even show up to the wedding. Okay, it's completely a business deal, but she is so strong and she perseveres and she makes her own way. She hunts, she rides, and basically she reads and reads and reads. And then what happens is she becomes the Duchess of Forlì, and her horrible husband, Girolamo Riario, from a family not as noble as she was, but powerful. He ends up getting murdered because he's part of an assassination plot for somebody else who was truly kind of a bad guy. And that point, she has a choice because she has a child. And so normally she wouldn't get to be the ruler, but she decides to stay the Duchess of Forlì and rule Forlì during the Renaissance, the only woman ruler during the Renaissance. Why am I shouting? I don't know. I'm excited. And she rules in his name. And she has lovers. She doesn't tell anybody. Later she gets married. She doesn't tell anybody. By the end of her life, she has 6 children by several men, and she's had lovers, and she's had this wonderful life, and she was a really good ruler. She was a little bit tough sometimes, but she ruled Forlì, the only woman ruler of the whole Renaissance. And what's the amazing kicker to this story is that when she was 33, another guy came along whose name was Jacopo Foresti, and he wrote a book called On Famous Women, and she was in the book. 33 years she went from reading the book and going, I wonder if I could do good things with my life and really be strong and maybe rule somewhere and maybe make my own way in the world and make my own choices and my own decisions and have my own money. And 33 years later, she did, and she was in the book that she read. To me, I think that's so cool because to me, it's what, like people ask you why you write, and I didn't always used to have an answer for that, but I'm always writing. And so like even today, I'm writing a first draft and I'm going, will this woman be able to get out of the bind she's in? And in a way, my characters end up being Mary, Judy, Benny, Julia Pritzker. All of these characters end up, and the men too, being role models for me of an ordinary person in a really difficult jam, maybe self-inflicted, but maybe not. And how do you want your life to be? Who do you want to become? And I will tell you that I don't think that's a question that stops when you're 21 or when you're 30. I think it goes on and on. And every choice you make is the person that you are. And so to me, that's why books matter. That's why the arts matter. That's why the Renaissance mattered. It gave us a way of looking at ourselves, at our world, at our God, at how we worship, about how we treat each other, and how we go about in this life, and what good we do, and how we leave it. So all of that stuff is operating in the unraveling of Julia. And it all started for me on that research trip because I soaked in so much of that Renaissance stuff and more thematically what it meant to Julia. So that's what my little talk's about tonight. I hope you found that interesting. I don't get too didactic, but I think it's interesting, and you guys are super smart. Readers are super smart. I don't know if we're smart because we read or we were smart and that's why we read, but whatever, it all comes out the same. Now, let me say the nice thing, because I always like to honor fellow authors. And I really love this author, Danielle Trussoni. She's a terrific author. This is just one of her books. I have The Ancestor. But she had an advanced copy of The Unraveling of Julia. And I want to read the quote to you in full because we didn't have it there in the video. And also introduce her books to you. She said, Lisa Scottolini's The Unraveling of Julia is a riveting Gothic thrill ride. We talked about Gothic last week. Through the sun-drenched hills of Tuscany, when an American woman inherits an estate shrouded in secrets, yes, she uncovers not only a hidden legacy, but her own destiny. That's what I was going for. A delicious escape, because there's a lot of food in the book, that blends suspense, atmosphere, and heart. This is Scottolini at her finest. That's so nice. Danielle Trussoni, her most recent book is The Puzzle Box. I read it. I loved it. Oh, The Puzzle Master, too. She is really terrific. So you'll love her, and I'm very, very grateful to her. So thank you very much for coming back again. I'll see you next Monday night. I believe it's Memorial Day, and if it is, fine, I'm here. And I'd love to see you again. So thank you very, very much for your support and your pre-orders. Please do for me and Francesca. I really appreciate it. And stay well till next week, and happy, happy Memorial Day. And I love you guys very much. Thank you again.